Next on the to-do list this week, the other big story I wanted to get to.
Huge.
Some big Gears of War 4 news. First up, the beta has been announced. We knew it was coming in the spring. It's coming smack dab in the middle of the spring. It's running longer than I thought it was. I know, Jose, you're a big Gears guy. Me too. Mitch, who's not here this week, is our biggest Gears of War fan.
Yes,
I like Gears.
biggest in the office.
I like it, but I'm not like a huge fan like Mitch that's read the books and stuff like that.
So the Gears of War 4 multiplayer beta is going to kick off on April 18th for those of you that own Gears of War Ultimate Edition for either the Xbox One or the PC. So you're going to get in about a week early, which is awesome. On April 24th, select Xbox Live Gold members will be invited. I suspect that is going to be a thing where eventually everybody gets in.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Like one way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody just come in.
They're going to make it seem exclusive at first in order to... This is the playbook by now. You make it seem exclusive so that you feel super special if you get invited, and you're out there tweeting about it, you're talking about it socially, but then eventually everybody's going to get in. So it's just they're going to maximize that hype.
Sure.
Get that hype train up to full speed. But then get this. The beta doesn't end until May 1st. So if you're in with the early access from the Gears Ultimate Edition, you've got like about 2 weeks to play this thing, which is awesome. That's a longer than usual multiplayer beta. And even if you're in the regular group, it's a full week. We're used to these things being 3 days.
How long were the Destiny? They were about a week, right?
No, well, the alpha was, I think, 3 or 4 days.
It was a weekend.
Yeah, the beta, you're right.
The
beta
was a
longer.
Week or so.
It was about a week, yeah.
Maybe
you're
a little
correct
more.
on that.
Yeah.
So that's good news. Now, the bigger issue I want to talk about, again, coming out of the Game Informer coverage, that's their cover story this month, great job by them, we learned that the Gears of War 4 campaign will be 1080p 30 frames a second. Multiplayer will be 1080p 60 frames a second. Now, I thought this was pretty open and shut, that this is awesome. But I took to Twitter with my opinion on this and got major reactions on both sides. So I want to see what you guys think. So, you're looking at... So now let's look at Halo.
Yeah.
Halo had always been 30 frames for everything.
That's right.
Master Chief Collection, which is, of course, it's a remastering of old stuff, made it 60 frames for everything. Halo 5 made the decision to go 60 frames, single player and multiplayer. They have sort of a dynamic scaling resolution for those times when things got crazy. It might bump it down a little bit. But Halo 5, 60 frames. One of the casualties of that, split screen. We did not get split screen because that was a trade-off that they had to make. So, and Call of Duty's always been 60 frames. That's been its calling card. It's always felt very smooth, looked very smooth. People love Call of Duty. So what do you guys think? I mean, for me, I'll just go first. I love this because with a campaign, with a story-driven campaign of which, remember, they're a dying breed at this point, or at least... As the generation has started, I'm hoping they're going to kind of come back around. Like, we got Titanfall 2 is going to have a campaign, but, Battlefront doesn't. Destiny's was weird, and most of Destiny is the late game stuff. But I love this. Because what Gears of War means to me is, part of what Gears of War means to me is a eyeball melting experience. Like, I should pop it in, and it should be like, wow. That looks amazing. And at 30 frames, they can dial that way up, much higher than they can for 60 frames. And then, sure, dial it back down a little bit and give me a 60 frames multiplayer. I love this. A lot of people didn't. What do you guys think?
So for me, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think that 60 frames per second necessarily makes a product better. I think you can deliver really high quality cutscenes, really high quality narrative at 30 frames per second. And I would also go a step further and say that sometimes it is the best way to present a narrative. Adding 60 frames per second is sometimes a buzzword. Sure, your game can do it. And I think the community, the reason they want it is because they want the option to do it at 60. For me, though, I am fine with the developer developing the product the way they want and making it look as best as they possibly can.
Jose?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a tough question to answer, right? Because I feel like the folks who are most vocal about wanting 60 frames per second, their intentions are very pure. Like, it's mostly about, I want a technically excellent, like ahead of the pack, just jaw-dropping experience.
Yeah.
And I do think that in the quest for that, sometimes it is just completely undervalued that 30 frames can still convey that and can still do that. Like, it kind of drives me up the wall a little bit. But I do feel for those guys because I understand what they want, right? They just want to be able to say, this is the most technically excellent thing that I can possibly play right now. But at the end of the day, technically excellent quality comes with the schedule. And I just don't think that, and I don't know the full story on why the Coalition or Gears of War 4, ultimately why the developers decided on this decision, but I would say that, you know, there is a timestamp on this, and these guys have to get it out the door on a certain schedule. So personally, I'm not that crazy about 60 versus 30. It's never been something that I consider a make it or break it purchase for me. But I want to try and understand the guys who do get worked up over this, because I think it isn't fair to dismiss them to an extent.
No, not at all. But a lot of the responses I got on Twitter from the pro 60 frames side was that, I heard this was a common thread. Anything less than 60, 30 is it doesn't feel good. It doesn't play right. And my response to that is, so you're telling me every Halo game prior to Halo 5 and Destiny and pretty much every shooter from last generation that's not called Call of Duty
had
didn't
bad
play
gameplay.
well, didn't feel good. Like, no, that's
a poor
that's just
argument.
not right.
It's a hyperbolic argument for sure. Like, it's definitely like that hyperbole.
Like, you didn't enjoy any of the other Halos.
No,
Last of Us
that.
on PS3 was trash. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
You know?
No, for sure. I do think, though, it is more noticeable to some folks than others. And I'll use a Nintendo example because, I mean, it's what I cover here most, right? But Mario Kart 8, when you play that in split screen or in single player, it is a 60 frames per second game.
Is it 720, 60, or 1080?
720, but
Okay.
I'll fill that out since that's part of the technical checklist. But then when you play in 4 players, it bumps it down to 30, and you notice it right away.
Sure.
You just go, whoa.
You also
I've
notice
played
it
these
if
courses 100 times. This didn't feel like this before.
Inversely, you also notice the change if you play at 30 a lot, jumping to 60.
Yes.
That's right.
Going back to Last of Us as an example, you could switch between 30 and 60, and you notice it. It takes a while to adjust to 60, and once you get used to it, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then when you go back, you definitely notice it.
Definitely. No, and I'm a firm believer a good game is a good game regardless of frame rate. And we came from an era where, like, you know, some N64 games or some PS1 games,
slideshows.
yeah, they turned into slideshows because too many things were happening at once.
You showed me recently. You did a preview of the new Star Fox Zero.
Yes, that's right.
And somehow you had like footage of the original in there for reference, and it was just like, it was shocking to look at, like, oh yeah, that's what the original Star Fox looked and ran like.
Exactly, yeah. And it's weird because we don't always hang on to that. But I just want to say to the folks that are really disappointed about like 60 frames per second, look, I'm sure the developer hears you. I know I hear you. I get what you're arguing for. But at the same time, like a good game is still a good game. And I still need to see the rest of Gears of War 4 before I can make that decision, right? And either dismiss it or decide to buy it based on, you know, what it is and what it's going to be.
And I will say this to the 60 FPS fans. I understand why you like it. It is it is smoother. But I don't think launching a game at 30 means that it's crap.
Yeah. No, and that's a lot of the knee jerk, like, you know, I'm not going to buy, no 60 FPS, no buy kind of thing. Like, that's ridiculous. Every other Gears of War game is been incredible on the 360
they're great
at
roller
30
coaster
frames.
rides, like, just
and
insane.
Yeah, I just think, well, the other point I guess I would make to this is, for those of you who are dead set on at 60 frames a second, okay, I grant you that, but I never want to hear any of you complain about graphics ever, because that's the trade-off.
Yeah, sacrifices
right?
have
You
to be
either
made.
get 30 FPS, gorgeous textures, amazing lighting effects, et cetera, or
you got to dial some of that back
you
for the
dial
60
it back
frames.
for the 60. So it's kind of, you lose by going to 60 a little bit.
Yeah, there is a trade-off. I had a developer tweet back at me saying, when I tweeted that out last week, he said, it was one of the creative leads. I have to look up who it was. Ian from Visceral, who was the single-player lead on
It's literally
Battlefield
twice,
Hardline.
Running at 60 is literally doubling the amount of data you have to display at any given time.
His tweet was, because I almost remember it word for word, he said, people don't understand the trade-off here. 60 FPS is nice, but as a developer, it's also nice to have 2 to 2.5 times the rendering ability, which is that's what the trade-off is.
Yeah.
So you really can dial up, for me, and I get some people, their priority is, I want the smoothest 60 frames experience possible, and I'm willing to trade off the visuals. Me, for a campaign where I'm not competing with people, as long as it's a smooth 30, which Gears of War always has been, I want those visuals dialed up to the max because I want my jaw dropped in service of a narrative experience.
Yeah, and the little they've shown, that game looks really good.
It does,
based on very, very little. I remember when Gears of War, the original, came out, I was inviting friends over and just turning on my television and going, look at this. I was like, this was the first next-gen thing at that time to me. I don't think any other game quite nailed it, and I'm looking forward to this game hopefully being that next example.
Awesome. All right.